had this big business plan. I spent a whole month writing it up. I knew every single number, every single vendor, everything in the show that why my business would be lucrative and productive and successful right off, like right out the door. Like there's no overhead. And I go in and the partner's like, this is a brilliant idea. You know, you don't really have to say anything. I'm like, but let me pitch myself. Like, let me speak because I practiced so hard on it. It's like, let me talk about how proud I am about this idea.
Hey, Michele, how are you? Welcome to 10,000 Miles.
Doing fabulous. Thank you for having me.
Well, this has been a little bit in the making. For the audience out there, I introduced myself to Michele via LinkedIn. You know how people pop up in your feeds and you start reading some of their content and you pick up a little bit about their energy and you pick up some of the, you think you know the way they think. So I reached out to Michele to say, hey, I've got this podcast. You seem like a person who's rediscovered themselves a few times and have really accepted challenges and you do some bold things. I'd love to have you on to talk about your story. So I had a 15-minute conversation with Michele. We got slightly acquainted and promised to save all the good stuff for this episode. But Michele, I'm only one page ahead in the book from the audience. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Michele Schamberger. I am the owner of a company called Plaintiffs Gambit. Proud mother of 3 beautiful souls, wife to an artist, daughter to 2 amazing parents, and I'm full of different hats, as you'll see along the way. I definitely do a juggling act of different skills and mindsets. I guess you could say I have a beautiful mind at moments that are like an Excel spreadsheet, but I keep moving. So definitely have different characters you'll see along the way of this episode.
Love it. That's a nice intro. So I touched on the fact that through my observation, I think that you come off as courageous. You come off as comfortable in your skin. And I know we all have things that we, the world sees me one way on the outside and I see myself differently. But to the extent, where your fire came from and where your drive came from and how your journey was forged, I'd love you to take us back and tell us about yourself. Start wherever you like.
So you would have to start when I was a child. I think I mentioned briefly when we spoke last time that I am, my siblings are handicapped. So I'm a middle child of 2 handicapped siblings. My older sister is mentally disabled and my younger brother being physically disabled. Yeah, my brother has cerebral palsy. He's been wheelchair bound since I was little. And I can recall being a child trying to help my parents with mostly my brother. My sister and I honestly didn't get along too well. There was just too many bumping heads there. But the mindset of, fighting against what medical science would say and said that he'd never walk. And I always wanted to show people that he could walk if we tried hard enough. And I had faith in it. So as a little girl, that was my first thing. It was always trying to help my brother learn to walk. And eventually through years of encouraging him, he actually took a few steps, and over time, that really gave me like the insight that if you keep trying, you can accomplish anything, no matter even science says you can't do it. You if you put your mind to it, it's mind over matter. As I grew up older, I was always compared to my siblings, and I always wanted to have my own voice. So throughout school, I was an overachiever at some points. Just one reason is just try to get attention of my parents, mostly my father. I was always trying to get his affirmation, and was a scholar. I was top in my class. I was a pianist. I would do concert piano. Did pageants. I did cheerleading. I did dance. I did band. I did basically anything you look in the yearbook. I was on every other page. And as I've gotten older, just my kids alone at this point and at this stage, if you fast forward, 20 something years along the way, my kids are my fire. They're the reason that I pushed through. But originally it was going to be, I would say it's just always been family. Mostly it's just trying to show my dad that I can do it, that I was going to be the backbone for the family. And I've continued to have that backbone and kept growing just to continue to take care of my kids and eventually maybe my parents, that I'll be taking care of them.
Cool. Hey, let's unpack some of those things from early on in your younger years. That's a lot. It's band, it's piano. concert pianist. As you could see behind me, I'm a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I spent the first 20 years of my professional career in the music business. And, where did you start your musical journey? How did that all come about?
So when I was probably in kindergarten, I picked up the piano. It was an outlet for me. It's funny because when my parents would know if I was upset by the type of music I would play. I played a lot of classical. So the heavier the music or the more intense, the deeper, a lot of Beethoven sometimes or Mozart, some of their pieces I would play very intensely. So it was an outlet of frustration. I took to the piano. As I got older, I took on other instruments. I did the piano, the French horn, the cornet, the trumpet, mostly just because they were all in the same key. But it was something I enjoyed. It was an expression of art to me. I wrote my own music throughout my youth. I eventually dated a guy in high school that was phenomenal guitarist, phenomenal musician, and we'd make music together. So for a long time, all the way until maybe my early 20s, I played the piano. Unfortunately, I gave it up when I was in my young 20s. My ex-husband was a very big critic when I played, so it kind of lost passion. And I was hoping my kids would want to play, but they had no interest in the baby grand that I had. So I haven't played like I did when I was younger, but it was for many, many years a therapy for me. It was an outlet for me. It was an escape from reality. I'd get lost in my music at hours at a time of playing. My parents would never have to force me to practice. It was just something I went to naturally.
Yeah. The thing that anytime I'm out and I see a musician playing, whether it be street musician or somebody performing, and they've got a tip jar out, I'm always the first one to put money in there. And people always look at me like, why do you race to the line to do that? And I'm like, because you guys don't understand the amount of hours it takes to become competent at an instrument, all unpaid, all completely unpaid. I just spent a week in Mexico. My daughter lives there in Mexico City and gave birth to her first child. And, I'm a sucker for the street musicians. I really am. And they'll look at me like, no, they're going to follow you all over the place. Don't do it. But I was telling somebody actually this morning, it's not for the performance. I don't contribute for the performance. I contribute knowing the amount of work, the amount of time, the amount of passion it took to actually really be able to play that instrument. I came across a pretty cool dude playing a clarinet along with tracks on the street. I could have probably sat there all day. Do you play anymore?
No, I haven't played. Like I mentioned briefly, I had a beautiful baby grand when my older kids were about 3 and 4. And when I got divorced, and that's at that time, I ended up selling my baby grand. And just my youngest one that I have now, my youngest daughter, had no interest in music, so I just never went back to it. I honestly was traumatized at some, kind of flashbacks of certain situations when I used to play. So I stopped playing. I was really hoping my kids would take to it, but didn't have any interest. Now, fun fact, so my great grandfather was a professional pianist. So my mom used to tell me as a little girl, it was something that I inherited through my genes. It skipped her, but it went to me because I loved it. Like it literally, I would do contests through college. Like I would just even compete in college for different placements for the. They had a music hall that, even though I didn't do a music degree, I was doing law. I would escape during my middle of my classes and go down to the music hall and like shut into one of the rooms and just play the piano. So
I love it.
Great memories. It's just I haven't touched it in years.
If I could offer you something, I told you, and you might not have known this, but I spent many years in the music business. I was a writer, producer, engineer, and my claim to fame was writing with Alice Cooper in the '90s, and I've had 54 songs with various artists. And there was a time in the late '90s when I lost my publishing deal that I really stopped playing because it became work and it was really difficult. And then as I jumped into my technology career, I didn't tell anybody about my past life and didn't expose that because I thought it was going to devalidate my technical prowess. What I have come to find out is that everybody is interested in my music background. And come COVID, my office used to face this way, and I turned my desk towards the guitars and the guitar wall there. And it's been such an incredible conversation piece, and it's enhanced my business. And we're going to get to this later, but when I think about the work you do exploring, travel destinations and things alike, I could picture you in one of those restaurants just doing your thing and enhancing what you do like 100x. Because if people don't like the resort or they don't like what you wear or everybody loves music.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does. So someday, hopefully I'll get to hear you play. That'd be a nice thing. So high school, you come out, you got married pretty early.
I did. Very early, good old Southern tradition, marrying before your 20s.
Okay.
But no, so I did. I went to college and I met my ex-husband my freshman year.
Okay.
It was a fluke situation. I was actually in RTC, I was practicing swimming. I hate to swim. I had a phobia of water, and I had one of my peers that was going to teach me to get over my phobia. And ironically, that one day she wasn't there, and I ended up not swimming. There was a hot sauna, like a dry sauna, and I went there, and I never really met my ex-husband in the sauna, of all places. It's funny, the way it happened is like if you've seen photos of me, I have very, very long hair. I'm a natural redhead, but right before that week, I had got on a spree thinking I'm 18, I can do whatever I want. I'm going to dye my hair black, and ended up having some highlights put in it, and they messed up, and I had to cut my hair off like a little boy. So and I felt really, really self-conscious about it. I went in the sauna, and here, lo and behold, was my ex-husband at the time. I didn't know it was going to be my husband, but he started talking to me like I was actually decent, and made me feel a little bit better. And over time, he was the only one I was with during college, and we ended up getting married really young. And I got pregnant my junior year, so I was basically not my junior, but my senior year, and I was 6 months pregnant when I crossed the stage. So I did everything really, really young. I was with him for a hot minute until my later 20s, but yes, I definitely did the whole good old Southern wife in my early 20s, and raising kids and trying to run a business and going to church and trying to do all the good old things you're supposed to do down here.
What state did you grow up in?
So I grew up mostly in Atlanta, right outside of Atlanta in Georgia.
Okay.
Down in my youth, about 13 years old, I went to Florida. Totally different of a culture shock because it's a different mindset where we're at. I'm in Pensacola. It's a smaller community. It's about 10 years behind. At that time, I was way behind. So being from Atlanta, it wasn't so, you weren't so rural. So some of the ideas were very open-minded where I grew up. And then I came down here, and it was very closed-minded, very old-fashioned, old tradition. Unfortunately, you'd see the rebel flag, you'll hear certain words. It was a culture shock when I moved down here, but I'm very, they call it the Bible Belt because it's like every other way you look, there's a church. So I was raised in the church throughout my youth as a young kid, all the way through, even after I got married, I went to church for a hot minute, but definitely raised in the Southern ways.
You said you went to law school? Is that right? Or you were studying law?
I never finished. And my undergrad was pre-law legal studies. I was going to go to finish up with the FSU. I have, plan was when I got pregnant with my son, I was in my way to go to FSU, which is Florida State University for law. And, at the same time, my ex-husband was getting his electrical engineering degree from the University of Florida. So we just couldn't, his studies and my studies, it just didn't work. So we made a pact that, okay, if I stayed and he went and finished school, we would switch. When he graduated, I go back to law school. And unfortunately, it's a blessing now that it didn't happen, but never finished my JD. I ended up going to corporate. I was hired on into a big corporation in my early 20s, and I worked many hours and paid for the family bills and put him through school. And when the time came that I could go back, I had two kids. The idea of not being able to work my first 2 years of schooling, I just decided to create a different path, which I did.
What did you do in that corporate job?
So I actually was hired on with Target. At the time, Target was really recruiting. They've changed so much in the last 15 years or so. But when I got in, and they had a program where they bring college students in. They do multiple interviews. I had different levels to go in, and I was brought in at the store management level when I came in, and I created this new program, 5-star cross-training program with Target, at least where we're at in this region. And I was picked to be in like a mentorship, and I was actually helped open a new prototype, was the PFRASH. So I did a lot of forum talks with the big corporations on this new prototype store. So I was trained in sales, how to handle big teams. I've had teams of 100 plus underneath me. So it gave, that created a foundation for what I'm doing now.
Sure.
And I see a lot of logistics, a lot of numbers, a lot of cells, seeing how if one piece moves, it messes your whole team up. You have one person that you lose someone on your team, it can affect your whole team. So I did that for about, if I can recall, about 4 years. And when I was trying to save my marriage at the time, when my ex-husband had, we moved back to Pensacola. We had moved to Panama City for a little while. We moved back to Pensacola. I decided to leave Target and go back into law because I did law during college. And so I just learned different things. I learned the corporate, then I learned how to do corporate law from the law firm that I was with. And it's just different, like I said, many, many hats that I wore led up to where I'm at today. So I went to corporate, I went to law, then I stayed home with my own business. Once I left my ex-husband, I went back to law and capacity of working with the Bar Association, where I learned how to do education, working with judges, and then eventually worked with a law firm. I got into mass torts and eventually led to opening my own logistics business.
Neat. So let's because we have some time, if you don't mind, tell me about some of the experiences along the way there. So you left Target, and where'd you go from there?
So Target was great. Like I've mentioned, it really helped me. I was very young and naive, and one thing I did remember out of all the things I remember at Target is we had mentors. And my mentor, his name was Wayne. He was he came from Georgia. He was a good old Southern man. And the phrases that like he would say just make me giggle. But he took me underneath his wing because I was young and green and very ambitious, but at the same time had the mindset of an I versus we team. And I remember him pulling me aside and during one of my reviews and saying, Michele, you're phenomenal. You top, whatever. You get all those stars. But my one thing for you to learn is that you don't throw your team under the bus to make yourself look better. You hold your team up and you lift each other together and move on. And it kind of caught me off guard. It's like, I don't throw nobody under the bus. But I realized over time that I was trying to take the glory for a team that really wasn't just me. It takes the whole team to create something. And I'm not that super person that does it by myself. Without them, I would not be where I was at. And it really hurt, it hurt my pride. But that from that one job that I carried along the way, eventually, as I moved along, so that one moment in time at that corporate really created the foundation of where I am today. So after that, when I left, I went into working for law firms. I had gone at one point, worked for very short minimum time. I had worked for a family law firm where it was defense side. So they were doing divorces and the other part of the practice was defense law. And I was only there for maybe 30 days. And I started questioning myself. I really want to be in law because I remember with the attorney that I worked with, he was on a defense. He had just done a case where the judge let off his client and he was very proud. And I get it. It's like a game. Like you got your client off.
Yeah.
He was a child molester and he basically was able to got the rights to carry a gun again. And he was just so proud of it. And I remember that day I actually wrote a letter to them, put the key on my desk, and I walked out. I'm like, I can't be associated. I don't care what kind of money I make, what kind of experiences. I cannot be associated with that. So I changed laws altogether. I was like, I can't do defense. I don't like defense. It's not my thing. I had done mass torts litigation in college. But I was trying to avoid that because I was kind of traumatized with mass torts. If you know mass torts, it's massive cases. There's thousands of clients. And I had done Accutane litigation. And at that time, they didn't have software. So we used to bait stamp all our documents. And I remember rooms of documents everywhere. So my mind is like, I'm not going to go back to mass torts. I hate mass torts. Don't want to be in it. Would have nightmares for years about Excel spreadsheets, missing statute of limitations. So I ended up actually finding a job at a law firm that did landlord-tenant, LLCs, estates. And during that time, I learned about bankruptcy. And I was there for a couple years. And during that time, I was raising my second child, which was my daughter. And fun fact that I didn't mention earlier is that I love to sew, or used to love to sew. So my grandmother taught me when I was about 5 years old how to create your own patterns and how to sew. And I'm really, really good at creating couture clothing. So I would start during that time at that law firm. I was making super cute little dresses for my daughter. She wore all these ruffles, and everyone wanted to buy my clothing that I was making. So eventually, one Christmas, they did this trade show at the big civic center, and my husband at the time said, you know what, I'll pay for your booth. I'll let you do a whole show floor of your clothing. If we sell out, you can leave your job. Because at that time he had his engineering and he was doing really, really good. So you
Mhm.
can law firm and you can open your own store and do clothing. So that's always been a passion. I love fashion. If you watch my LinkedIn feed, you probably notice my clothing. I just can't.
Haven't seen the same outfit twice.
Well, you're cute. There's something
And
that
you won't.
I don't know because it's something I've done since I was a little girl. But
Mhm.
did this trade show and I sold the whole floor. And within a month, we ended up. I left the law firm and opened a kids boutique. It's called Felicity's Closet, which is my daughter's name. So I opened this little gunshot little boutique where I had all my clothing in it. And I had created this idea that if I bring in vendors that volunteer their time, instead of paying for a booth, I would have free labor to run the store.
Mhm.
I never had overhead besides for my electric bills, and the vendors would cover my time. So if I needed time, I didn't have to be there. And of course, they would get a percentage of their sales, just a little bit, but not much. So I was making money no matter what. Um, that boutique did really well. And eventually I opened a second portion of my business and I transferred it from Felicity's Closet to Fifi and Frogs, which I had two buildings beside each other at that point, then the boutique. And then I had a party planning. If you can start seeing some of the stuff things are going to come in.
Yeah, I love how this is coming together.
So during that, we did mommy tea times or mommy days out or like kids parties. So I started overseeing the boutique, running vendors that we would bring in and rotate their different products. And then we have the boutique where we would do event coordinating and bring in different vendors to work parties and work different little meetings that need to take place at that venue. I had actually done really well, and my competitors in the area felt it basically on their sales. And I had a company that came in, and eventually during that time, I was going through some health and my ex-husband, and I was ready to transition out of my bad situation with him. So I sold my business. So most businesses are upside down their first year. I walked away making quite a bit of money
Right.
in that business. And during that time, they gave me a little floater to basically get out of a really, really bad situation. I try to protect my kids. I basically lost almost everything I had during that transition, but it saved me on some ways of not losing some things and some investments. And and to go back, and people are probably wondering at this point what went on with my ex-husband. So I very open about it on my platforms. I am a survivor of domestic violence. I went many years of dealing with physical abuse as well as mental abuse. And when the point that my ex-husband took it out on my children, that was my time to go. I'm a firm believer you don't hurt elderly, you don't hurt children, you don't hurt animals. And when you hurt a child, that I don't care how big your house is, how beautiful your cars are, whatever jewelry you have, I just couldn't do it. So I left that situation, which basically I signed the rights to everything away. He got the houses, he got the cars. I just basically was homeless and had nothing. And thankfully, my parents took me in and helped me and protected me. They have been helping me since in a lot of different avenues with my children. But I during that small window, I was about 6 months to a year, was trying to figure out how to handle the kids, transition from that. And eventually, I met during that time, my current husband, and he was very adamant that I should get back to working. And I honestly didn't want to work at the time. I just mentally was not there. And I don't know how I found the job. I think it was on a college platform or something about the local bar association looking for an individual to eventually take over for the director. It was a client-based position. So I ended up getting that position, and I was trained underneath the current director eventually to take his position as the director. But during that time, I was doing event coordinating. I was doing events for the bar association. I was doing continuing education. I was working the investigators. I was doing the judges, different things with the different judges. So during a 3-year period, I learned how to do like logistical things for events for the legal arena. So now not only do I have a background in business, I have a strong background in doing it in the legal.
Yep.
Well, and during that time, they found out I have a very good marketing background, and I took over their Summation, which is a law magazine. So I became the chief editor of the law magazine in that time. And I got to write articles. I did lots of articles. I did the layout of the magazine. And then eventually I was doing the newspaper that came out weekly for the Bar Association. So when the time came when the director decided to retire, I didn't understand. I was a little bit naive, being the little good old country girl that I am. I didn't realize the boards, how they work. So this was supposed to be every so many years, they're changing out the president, the vice president, secretary. So you move the board. So when I came, that whole board that eventually that hired me are no longer there. And some political things took place during the interview process. And unfortunately, even though I was trained for 3 years for the position, I was bypassed. And my pride got in the way, and I tried to stay and I tried to be graceful and try to keep that smile. But it really broke my heart at that time. And I'm not realizing everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Everything has its place and time. And was befriended by one of the past bar presidents that found out what happened. So everybody knew who I was at that point. Like everyone in that whole group had learned who I was, because I was very, very involved with community. I was doing tons of volunteering work. I was working my weekends, working my nights. I gave a lot of my life to the bar association, which is fine. I loved it. It's like, I truly loved that job. My youngest used to be able to go with me to work, which was a blessing in so many ways. The youngest come to work with me, and they let me do that. And so everyone knew my little girl. But the past president came to me. He's like, Michele, I heard that you unfortunately was not picked for the president. Can you send me your resume? And I didn't think anything of it. So I sent him my resume. He's like, you know what? I'm not happy. I'm trying my best to keep a smile on, but be graceful. And it was eating away at me with in my mindset, because I was looking at my competitor every single day that he got the position that I was hoping to become. And so I sent my resume. It was at a local firm downtown. And then a week of that, I ended up getting a position. I remember during that interview, with one of the partners, he's like, Michele, whatever you want. I was like, what do you want to do? I was like, whatever you do, don't put me in litigation or mass torts. I hate it. Like, just put me behind the curtain. Let me make sales. Let me do a position where I'm not seen. Like, let me do my thing. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with bringing in like networking. Let me go to conferences or like bring in contracts for you. So hide me, basically. And I was assigned to one of the partners, Mr. Neil Overholtz, which versus well, he's passed at this point, but he was a very unique personality, and I did really well with him because the way I was, I don't get offended very easily, or I let things brush off me. And he was a very strong personality, because he's a brilliant man. He's a very brilliant man. And I was assigned with him, and during a small window for a couple of years I was working with him, I did a lot of conference, because conferences, I go to conferences and bring in contracts to help the law firm. And eventually, during that time, I wasn't aware that another partner had gotten picked to become a lead for one of the biggest litigations in the United States that had ever taken place at that time, which was the 3M earplug litigation. We were on the plaintiff side. And eventually they got to the bellwether portion. And if you know mass torts, bellwethers are basically when they start doing sampling of cases that would eventually go to court for everybody if they were to litigate everything. So they did a ton of bellwethers. But when that first started, they didn't realize how far it's going to go into. But I was kind of cherry picked out of my position. You know, Michele doesn't really do much. She's kind of quiet. Let's let her handle the logistics. So I kind of got pulled from Neil, jumped into the logistics for the 3M litigation. It was a consolidated trial the first time that I had no clue what I was doing. They're like, oh, Michele, she knows how to do event coordinating. She knows how to run people, because yes, it's on my resume, but the magnitude that I was envisioning. So our first trial was consolidated, was multiple plaintiffs with tons of attorneys. And this, with it being the newest litigation, there was so much new things to learn. So they were having these big board meetings and bringing in like more than 60 plus attorneys at one point. I mean, we had to do hotels, we had to do the food, we had people packing out the courtroom. You couldn't fit everybody in it because it was the biggest thing they wanted to see. The people were just flying in to see this. Well, during that time, it was a sink or swim situation with my job. I didn't know what I was doing. I was creating as I go. It's kind of just flying in the wind, praying to God I don't sink. And at that time, I was actually still, the team normally stayed in a hotel, and I was not part of that team. At that time, I didn't realize I needed to be part of the team. So I was staying at home, which I'm like an hour away from downtown. So I was driving back and forth at 4:00 in the morning till late at night and go and do this for 6 weeks. And I literally it was very, very difficult, but it was like a high when we finished because we did really well. But I didn't sink. I actually swam, and I swam very, very well. And everybody that worked with me wanted to use me for their bellwether. So when the bellwether started rolling along, these different law firms that were not the firm that I was with, I actually worked almost every single bellwether there was. So I was loaned out to different law firms and started working their cases. And at some points, I would have multiple trials at the same time that I was overseeing. There was one time that we had a trial in Pensacola where I was working on one floor of the courthouse for one litigation, and on the second floor, I was working for a different litigation. So, in a very fast small period of time, I had basically going, but I was learning a lot of different things really, really quickly. I remember being halfway into the year, and it occurred to me, it's like, I think I really do this as a business. I'm like, everybody really wants to use me, no matter, they don't mind. And at the time, I was working so much overtime, but I wasn't feeling that it was adequate to what I was doing. I felt like my value was much more. And the numbers that I saw in some capacities, I was like, man, they can do this. They can pay me to do it. And I brought up this idea to one of the partners that I had been working with, and it was a female. And she didn't like the idea. She's like, no, it's too political. They're not going to want to do it. Don't do it. And I looked up to her and admired her. And I'm like, you know what? If she doesn't think it's going to be good, I don't need to do it. It's not my time. And eventually some political things along the way during this litigation took place. And it made me start questioning a lot of things. And I was starting to get burned out because I didn't feel valued or part of the team, but yet I was part of the team. I was running all the moving parts. I was doing the logistics for the experts. I was doing the team. I had people that were going to the doctors. I was basically anything that was moving, I was moving it. And that way the team could focus on what mattered, which was the client, and they could do their case review and had their food waiting for them. I learned everybody's diets, and I created all these different things. And eventually it's like, had this thought, it's like, you know what, now or never. And January of the year that I decided to go on my own, which was 2022, I approached one of the partners of the firm, and I was like, you know what, I've got this brilliant idea. I think we will all win. It's like, you can use me. I can be on my own. You're not losing money. You're getting, you get reimbursed for my services. We'll talk about it, but not right now because I have all these trials in January, and I will basically we will pick it up and put the note in it, and for February. So we set this appointment for February, and I still remember the dates in my mind. So it was a Monday, February 7th. I had this meeting, present it. The partner thought it was a great idea, and at the time I had mentioned, like, you know what, I really love this law firm in my family. I would not be where I'm at without this firm. I had gotten really attached to it. Mostly Neil that I worked with I became really close as like working, because I worked side by side with him for so much. And he had been dealing with some health issues, which was very private, but I made sure his meals were right, trying to keep him healthy, drove him back and forth during trials at some points. And I told them at the time, it's like, I don't want to just leave the firm. I just don't want to ghost y'all. I don't want to just walk out and leave. Like, we can transition over a 6-month period. I don't want to leave Neil. Like, Neil is too important to me. I don't want to burn that bridge. And I was told at that time, like, well, we'll let you know on Wednesday what the plan of action is, how we're going to move forward with your business idea. And I was like so excited. I was really super nervous because when we first went in, I had this big business plan. I spent a whole month writing it up. I knew every single number, every single vendor, everything in the show that why my business would be lucrative and productive and successful right out the door. Like, there's no overhead. And I go in, and the partner's like, this is a brilliant idea. You don't really have to say anything. I'm like, but let me pitch myself. Like, let me speak, because I practiced so hard on it. It's like, let me talk about how proud I am about this idea that I come up with. It is basically a business around me, something I've created. So moving along to Wednesday, which is February 9th. And I remember where the partner had said, you know what, we're going to contact you. We'll let you know Wednesday. So 5 o'clock comes around. I remember looking at my clock. I said, man, it's 5 o'clock. Maybe I just sent a nice little note saying, hey, I'm just following up on our little conversation from Monday. What are your thoughts? And nothing. I heard nothing. I'm like, well, I guess they changed their mind. And then that evening around 7, I got a phone call from a dear friend that worked from another law firm. And she's like, oh, Michele, I am sincerely sorry. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, Neil Overholtz just passed away this afternoon, this morning. And I remember sitting on my porch and just crying, like, oh my God, like, well, shoot, now I don't have a job because I'm just writing a girl, and I didn't get an answer on my business. So I'm kind of in a pickle here, but I was more upset to the fact that I had no idea. It was blindsided. I knew he had some health issues, but nobody was expecting it. Nobody had expected it. So I didn't say anything. I just kept on working. It's like I had to be that Friday. It actually was on an airplane heading out to California, and I get a call from one of the partners like, hey, where you at? And I'm like, I'm heading to this conference, taking care of all these, going to go get some contracts basically. And he said, well, we need to do a live celebration for Neil. I'm like, well, that's great. We'll do it when I get back and we'll plan it for the next, few months out. We'll do the celebration. He's like, no, we're going to do it next week. I'm like, well, shoot, you realize I'm not in Pensacola. But over the weekend, I was able to put together a really nice event at one of the venues that Neil liked to go to. I literally flew in on Tuesday at midnight almost, and the celebration was Wednesday. And I remember going in on Wednesday in that morning, and I was like, and I even thinking, it's like, this is not the right time. It's, this is Neil's time. This is not Michelle's time. We're not going to discuss anything that I had proposed last week because this is not the right time and place.
Yeah.
We really need to celebrate a life that was really respected. And I remember the partner that I spoke to walked past my desk. He's like, you're on your own, Michele. We're going to back you. As of
Wow. Fantastic.
You're basically Plaintiffs Gambit. And,
Amazing.
that kind of like, I couldn't really process it too much because I was too worried about this big celebration that we're going to do in a couple hours. We had all these people coming in from 3M from all over the United States to celebrate Neil, and they had some of their meetings. And so when I was at the celebration, I did mention, because I basically had no job. In reality, you got to think like, you're on your own, Michele. Neil's not there, and you got this business. I'm like, well, shoot, dog it. Well, here we go. I was like, this is it. Time now or ever. And I remember speaking with some of the people that I had done some trial work with. I'm like, hey, by the way, if you're looking for me after this, it's like, this is not the time or place, but if you need trial logistics, reach to me directly. You may not be able to reach me, but if you know where to find me, basically. And it's like that rest of the week, I'm like, well, I kind of don't have a job. And then the following week, that Monday, or it was Monday or Tuesday, I remember Neil's best friend called me, Doug Mansour, and I will tell the story to everybody. And I know I spoke about it in college to him. So if he listens to this, he's going to probably giggle. But I will never forget to this day that phone call where I pick up and he's like, and he says these words in his good old Texas accent. It's like, Michele, my dear, I'm going to contract you. I'm like, well, Doug, I don't think you know how much I cost. And I don't think that's how much my fees are. And I remember thinking in my head, it's like, well, now or never. If Doug's not willing to pay it, who I love like family, then no one's going to pay it. And he didn't even blink an eye. And he's like, where do I send the check, basically? And within that month, I had contracted over 4 trials back to back to back.
That's great.
And I basically ran out the door with no overhead, doing very, very well, very, very quickly. And Plaintiffs Gambit was basically born. And between social media, like creating my LinkedIn at that time and doing the 3M litigation, and eventually evolving into doing conference logistics and creating trial lawyers and mass torts during this year for my first year, kind of boomed. It just exploded. And now, granted, with my background in marketing, I'm pretty heavy on LinkedIn. I know how to market pretty well from my past experiences. That it's surreal. But at the many hats that I wore along the way with the logistics from the corporate, learning the law, how to do LLCs, learning how to do maneuvering vendors with my boutique, and then working with the bar association, learning how to do CLEs, working with judges, working with multiple law firms, and eventually doing sales with. Actually, when I went to these conferences to do the contracts, I met all these vendors that are now vendors at my conference. So it's just amazing how, like I said earlier, that I didn't know what was that reason for me not becoming the director, but I do now. So I don't question anything. When something doesn't happen the way I want, I'm like, something bigger and better is coming.
100%. Boy, if
creating
that is the truth,
it evolved me to a better person, stronger person. And sometimes I work very long hours and I'm very ambitious, but like you asked me what my fire is at this point in my life, is my kids. I have this vision of creating a business that will become the foundation of their future, and eventually just it'll pay for their colleges. It'll be something that they can fall on if they decide not to do the career that they get their education in. But they're the reasons I am busting my butt, sometimes not even sleeping for days. But I am forever thankful, because what I've created in less than 3 years, it's about 2.5 years, is people work 20 years, if not longer, to create. And it basically walked out the door because the relationships I had built during a litigation I worked, it basically maybe like just catapulted me into a position that's just completely amazing. I get to travel all over the United States. I've got clients from New York to California, go to Mexico. I basically manifested a business that everything I love. It's like
fantastic.
I mentioned before, like the game to me. I love chess, and I've created a job that is basically playing chess every single day in a bigger capacity with multiple Excel spreadsheets and lots of phone calls.
I want to ask some questions because I'm grinning here and I'm finding all these spots, you know. So let me go back to my first thought. You have a ton of resiliency. Anybody who's listened for the last 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, can take away that there are so many lives you've lived inside of this life you've had. And if I have to point to one thing that I would say rises to the top, there are many, but I just want to point to resiliency. And then I'm going to park that for a second. I'm going to mention the second thing just so we talk about it. But we'll come back to the second thing. The second thing is accepting the journey. And we're going to use that as number 2, because you said something about being disappointed, but learning it's because there's something else coming. There's an art form in that. But come back to your resiliency. If you had to think here for a minute, and if you want to pause for 30 seconds or you don't need it, well, take the time you need. What's your first memory of you sort of having this epiphany or awakening or understanding resiliency in yourself? Like where did that start? Where did it come around? You know, how'd that form?
So I've had this on my platform multiple times. So I suffer with body dysmorphia. I started that when I was about 7 years old, and it is a battle that I have dealt with, and I learned actually probably about 6 months ago what caused it. But being between the two handicapped siblings, I felt like I was called perfect, and I always wanted to find. I felt bad because everyone's like, well, why aren't you like your sister? Why aren't you like your brother? Why aren't you handicapped? Why? I mean, I had a 4.4 GPA. I was in everything you can think of. So eventually, when I was young, before I started doing I started micromanaging what I saw in the mirror. And I would find something wrong. I'm like, oh, well, I've got this mark, so I'm not perfect. I'm like my brother and sister. There's something wrong with me. So my flaw was my body, and I struggled with that, and I had an eating disorder, and for many, many years, and it's something I struggle with to this day, and I've done public speaking about it. But what I saw in the mirror is not what you guys see, and I struggle with it. Like, I don't find myself attractive at times, or I have problems. I'm compulsive with exercising sometimes. But I learned over time to try to battle that. And that was my first resilience, is to try to overcome. I went through therapy for it, and trying to manage and learn to deal with a mental disorder, and trying to find ways that I could use my story to teach other young women and men how to deal with something that we really is not there. Like, for me, it became an anxiety issue, but that was the first struggle. And then later on, as I got older, I didn't really struggle with much. I had some sexual assault in high school, which taught me to some issues with men. And eventually with my ex-husband, I became a fighter. And that's I found my voice when my daughter got hurt for the first time. And there was a big fire that was put into me in a different capacity besides just body dysmorphia, but the fire as a mother, as a provider, protector. And that was my biggest. I can't see, I don't know how I did it at the time, but I managed to get out of a really, really bad situation and protect my children. To this day, I will protect them. But I would say that was one of the biggest things in my early 20s, is trying to find a way to provide without the support of a man, to be on my own. I learned how to survive on my own, and learn how to use my gifts to create an income or create a connection or a home for my kids. And as I move along, I try to teach now from what I've learned through these experiences to others. But I am a fighter. If I put my mind to something, I am 210%, to the point that I put myself in the grave, because I'll work myself to death. But and you wonder sometimes where I get to from. I'm going to have to give credit to my dad. My dad, as a little girl, used to say, Michelle, you could do better. He's like, what could you learn from this to become like to the next level. What are you going to do next time to get to the next level, Michele? I know you can do the next level. Eventually, at one point, it did break because I never thought I was good enough, but eventually learned what I was saying is that what are you learning from these difficulties? What are you learning from the mistakes? What are you learning to become the person you want to become? And as an adult now, I see back. As a child, I didn't understand, but now I do, that during these times of difficulties and the different opportunities, what I can do differently. And now at this point, it's my voice, my platform. I write a lot. I speak out. I take my struggles and go public. I mean, transparency is huge with me. Um, or helping others is a big thing with me, like seeing young businesses where I can help them, because I know that was a point in my career that I was eating peanut butter jelly or going down to the food pantry and having help from the community myself. So I am no, there's no shame. Like I have no shame from my experiences to being someone that was basically on food stamps, homeless, basically having nothing to someone that's wearing very nice clothing, having very nice accessories and traveling the world. So my resilience, I feel that it's become my fire and my tool to teach others and eventually create a business that's thriving.
So your resilience came through adversity. And rather than let it bury you, you used it as a tool to sort of to grow you. You know, it's funny. You mentioned your dad. Hey, what can you have done differently? I'm a father of three. I have two girls and a boy. Boy's in the middle. And mom's been an ace with all the kids. But you know, the girls love their mama. They love their daddy for a different reason, but they love their mama, and it's good. And my son is the best son you could have for a woman or for a father or a mother. He's incredibly wonderful to his mother, and he's a pal as well. But I've suffered from the overachieving, and I'm a very self-aware person, but I've had to dance around celebrating his wins and also trying to inspire him to sort of want to personally grow and achieve. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult. And so I think back about your father saying, hey, what can you have done to take this away from the next time? There is a science and an art to that I don't think anybody's perfected, only because the recipient is different every time you try to apply it. I'm sure you have many kids. I have a number of kids. The same things don't work with every single kid because they're different. They're different humans. They're different individuals. And I used to say to myself, how could my three kids be so different? I've done all the same things for them. And I had friends say to me when my daughter was 26, she's 28 now, going to be 29. When he said to me, I said, I've done all the same things. Why are they so different? And he said, because they're different. I said, well, where the hell were you 26 years ago? I could have used that feedback 26 years ago. So it's interesting, and you said you went through this period of, hey, maybe I'm not good enough. Did you get to a spot where you can appreciate it? Like that your dad's interest was not in criticizing you, but in helping you be everything you can be? Because at least that's what I take away from it.
I struggled for many years, and it was with my kids when I started doing what he did. And I'm like, it clicked. And it's so funny.
Yeah.
Next, my dad's like, now you see what I'm talking about, Michele. Now you see about these things, these topics, and he'll go over the things that I get upset at as a kid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right.
Yeah.
He literally, like, I get it. And I am very blessed to have the father that I do have, and that the strength and my dad is an old school. Like, he is provided for my mom. My mom's been a stay-at-home mom with two, like I said, it's handicapped siblings. Like, he's always been the one to provide for the family. He's always been the stronghold, always been, even though he's gone through cancer and radiation, the man is struggling with a cane. He had a heart attack a couple weeks ago when I was in the hospital. Like,
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
The man truly is, like, things that I'm seeing now and how he pushed through. Like, I admire him, and I want to eventually be like a tenth of what my dad is or my mom is. Like, if I can manage to do an ounce of what they've done for me in my life, I have achieved something. So, but yeah, that's definitely, I think it's as having my own kids is how it clicked. Everything's clicked. A lot of things have been clicking over the last couple of years for me with my parents and understanding what they did with me. And honestly,
yeah.
I feel like I could probably write a memoir of some of the stuff that I did as a kid, and not like I was way overachiever. I honestly probably at some points too much, but my dad has helped create the woman I am today. And I feel like I'm a strong woman. I feel like I am able to be heard, and without their guidance, I wouldn't be where I'm at today at all.
Well, it's amazing. And it's funny. I had a conversation with some colleagues this morning, and they said, "Hey, how was your week in Mexico City?" I become a grandfather, and which is bizarre in and of itself. It's a beautiful thing, and it's adjustment for everybody. But you start questioning the amount of time you have left, which is interesting. And I know how my dad felt, by the way. But I said, I got all these new rules now. I said, but we're all adjusting. I said, my daughter went from daughter to fiance to wife to mother in 3 years. She's still all of those things except fiance, but that's a lot of adjusting for her. So we've got to give her some grace and, allow them to create what they're creating. Her husband's an amazing guy. They have a beautiful relationship. But, it's all becoming grandparents as well. Like we're adjusting to the whole thing. So, but my friend did say to me this morning is like, the kids, when they start creating their own families, there's this interim spot where they might not appreciate all you have done to this point in a way that maybe demonstrates it to you the way you wanting to receive it. But don't worry, they come back around. And so hearing you say that, you've got this appreciation now for your parents in a way that maybe you didn't see a while back, I think is a nice message for folks out there that are listening. And sort of, it's a bit of a ray of hope for some, for sure.
I'm with my kids. They're making me question some things like, man, I hope my parenting skills not that bad, because I hope what I'm doing will pay off. And I see it actually in my son, like where he's going up. I know I haven't mentioned him much, but he's going off to the Citadel to become a neuro doctor eventually with the Army.
Wow.
But sometimes I had questions when he was in high school because he was so quiet to himself and he was more of a gamer, but he eventually became a leader of a pack during high school on his senior year, and now is a leader at the university and doing a lot. And I'm like, okay, if it wasn't me, at least it was my parents, and my parents are very heavily involved.
Okay.
With the kids. So one of us did something, and we're doing something right. So hopefully when he gets older, he's going to realize the sacrifices I made, the hours I worked, leaving a bad situation to protect them. And yes, we might have had to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and green beans out of a can for a hot minute, but look at where we are at now today. So, but yeah, I think as a parent, me too. I'm like, I hope it comes back around. I hope everything
I'm hopeful.
I hope they notice.
I'm hopeful.
Everything I've done is for them. Granted, I've had some, some things I've done for myself, but
yeah,
reality,
you have to.
It's, I even buy a car just so I can carry my kids' friends around. I mean, it's like the little things they probably don't notice until they get older that, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
In the sports car, she's driving a big old bus to carry everybody around. So
yeah, you're the chauffeur. Yeah. Hey, we parked a second item that I would love to chat about. You mentioned something about the, things not working out, maybe not at the time. At the time, you don't understand, or you didn't understand. But now, as you're on, and you've achieved so much, and you've gone through creating a business and adversity and doing all of these things, you realize that the things that don't happen for you didn't happen for a reason, because there were other doors awaiting you. Tell me about that journey, because I know I've been on the same one, and I'll interject a story real quick. I've been very fortunate in my career transition to have always gotten every job I've interviewed for, except one. And when I didn't get hired for this job, I was somewhat devastated. I thought I lost my mojo. I was like, how could that possibly happen? Like, I'm an ace at the interview and I'm really good at what I do. So I've got a good track record of delivery. I'm personable. I get the people thing. I got the leadership thing. I've got the right experience. And when I met with the recruiter, after they told me we were down to 2 people and they chose the other person, I met with the recruiter and I said, hey, I'd like to regroup on Tuesday when you have some time. I want to evaluate the process, see where I messed up, and see why I lost. And they said to me, oh, you didn't lose. You were actually the winner. You were the leader in the selection process. I said, all right, help me out here. Or, why is it that I didn't get the job? They said they thought you would get bored here in less than a year and leave and find another job.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And I said, I didn't buy it at the time. But when if I look at that moment, had I gotten that job for whatever reason, they were right. They were absolutely right. I probably would have made it a year there, maybe a little bit more. But when I think about the things that happened along the path that I was down, everything worked out in an amazing way. When did you have this epiphany? When did you realize that something didn't go the way you thought it was going to go, and rather than see it as a downside, when did you have this epiphany that you're just able to let it go into the universe?
So two things. We'll start off with my education. So in high school, I had gotten into West Point. I was going to go in and become a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and that was my dream. And when 9/11 happened, decisions were made, and I ended up staying home and going to the local college instead. And I ended up in TC then. Actually was one of the first girls to ever make the Ranger Challenge team. I was a very competitive, one of the top people in the program. And when they were going off to do the medical screening, they tested my eyes and they put you up to this little machine, you look inside it, and they're like, Cadet Kelly, tell us where the spots are, like which one's closest to you. And I started giggling. I'm like, no, they're all the same. Like, no, Cadet Kelly, like really, which dot is closest to you? I'm like, no, they're all on a flat piece of paper. What dots am I supposed to be seeing? It was a depth perception test, and I had no clue. And you have zero depth perception. So I could never fly. I could never be a pilot. So finding that out, my freshman, it just fully changed my whole plans of being in the military and moving up to become an officer or whatever I wanted to be. And I ended up getting out of ROTC. But if I had gone to West Point and not really knowing and not really thinking about being a pilot or however, maybe it worked out for a reason. That was one of the first experiences that I had, that something I was truly setting my heart and love to, being like, well, this ain't happening. And you had to revert your whole career into something.
Yep.
And at that time, my daddy was like, you need to get into something that's going to make a lot of money. And I can't be a doctor. Blood is not my thing. Can't do needles. Can't do any of it. So, and I'm really good at like game playing and logistics, and I always did really good at logistics tasks. And so we ended up going to the legal arena. My dad really encouraged me to go into law because he felt that I could read a contract like nobody else and find the loopholes. But so that was the first step in moving me to where I needed to be. But I'm going on to a spiritual level. You might have seen in some of my pictures. If you go on LinkedIn, I have a tattoo on my arm that says 222. So I have seen this.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's on my right arm.
Okay.
I've had it done about 6 months ago. I'm actually at the beginning of the year. But when I was a little girl, probably about 8, whenever there was a traumatic or transition in my life, I would heavily see this number 222. It could be on a clock, it could be on a piece of paper, it could be wherever it may be. But whenever I start seeing this number aggressively, my path is about to change, or something that's going to basically deviate me to become someone that I wasn't at the time. I evolve, basically. And I didn't know this until like later in years. So I would see it as a young youth. I had some very traumatic things happen within my family that no one should ever experience, but I would see it a lot when I was about 12. And then when I was in high school, I saw, and that's when I was going through some abuse, with sexual abuse that I had dealt with. And then through college, and every time I go through these major transitions in my life, I would see this number or be observant of this number. And it's something that I've seen since I was a little girl. And as I've gotten older, I'm more aware. So like recently, for example, the 222 has been everywhere in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm going through some major transitions in my thoughts process for things that I'm planning for 2025. So I know, and I joked with my daughter in the car yesterday. I'm like, hey, Fifi, we're seeing 222, honey. It's like, we're about to go through some shit. It's like, it's coming. And you know what? Mommy always gets through, but this is going to be a shit show. Excuse my language. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
It's okay. You're allowed.
But during the holidays, we're about to see some things change in the next 2 months. Because no one gets this aggressive and I start seeing my spiritual number or my spirit guide, I know I'm going to be forced, or I'm going ready to transition to something that I don't think I'm ready for, but I basically am. So those are going to be something that's going to be a path change, or a change in my career, a change in my way I do business or something with the family. I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's coming. And I have some ideas what it is, but it's we've had some health issues within myself and my father, but some transitions. But that on a spiritual realm, I've seen it since I was a little girl, and I've become as an adult aware of the signs. And I, to each their own. I mean, I think I'm crazy, but if I'm crazy, that's okay. But I do. I notice these things, and it's something that I've observed as I've gotten older, and it's so sentimental to me that I even had it tattooed to remind me it's going to be okay. You're going to get through. You've always gotten through. Like, I've always leveled up to become a stronger woman, a stronger mother, a stronger business owner every time I go through the transition. So, granted, 2025, I'm transitioning. There might be some news coming out next month that people just.
Is there a feeling you get when you have this, can you describe it other than like seeing a number? Is there a feeling you get when this thing is about happening?
Yeah, it's an overwhelming, like a pressure and anxiety. It's not it's not something, a comforting feeling of like warmth. It's more of like adrenaline rush. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you're about to jump off a cliff and your heart rate starts going up, and you know that you better plan accordingly of if you're going to have the proper equipment to make that jump, or you're going to get really hurt. So it's a high. It's like an endorphin, but at the same time, it can be painful because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's woken me up in my sleep. I have problems sleeping at night. And that's sometimes that's the reason I write at night. But the 222 is definitely a sign. And when I start seeing it, I'm like, okay, I understand why I'm feeling the way I am. Something I've had some things happen in the last 6 weeks that it's really opened my eyes on some things that I need to change. I think I mentioned to you before that I was hospitalized for 10 days, nearly lost my life. My dad had a heart attack when I was in the hospital, but he thought I was going to die. So
Oh
there's
my
this
gosh.
linger. And I've been seeing this 222, and I'm like, well, we've got to make some changes because life is short. Like you said, you don't know how long you have with somebody or yourself. So
Yeah.
that will be transitioning into some different things and better health, hopefully this next year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I knew intuitively that was going to be the answer when I asked you. It was a bit of a rhetorical question. Like, I got a sense that you were going to tell me there was this feeling of anxiety or discomfort and things. And I want to share something, a bit of a discovery I had in my own life, and you can decide to think about it, use it, or throw it away, whatever you think is useful. But I myself get the same feeling. I don't tend to sort of have a sign of a number or something else I'm recognizing, but I can definitely recreate the feeling, or at least recall it when it's happening again. And at one point, I had this awakening. It's like two bright lights came on almost when this happened. And I just said to myself, because at first I was like, shit, I was feeling again. Breathing, just thinking about it. I'm like, and early on, I would, as a coping mechanism for it, I would jump into something else, distract myself from this feeling. And it was through the death of my mother, and this feeling would come around, and I would constantly distract myself from things. And somebody had given me the advice that when I get in that feeling, don't run from it, sit in it.
Mm-hmm.
And allow yourself to manage it and dissipate it, because running from it, it never really goes away. It's kind of covered over. Now, one of the very first times I tried it, I had this giant epiphany. And the epiphany was, holy shit, this is the feeling I get every time I'm about to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Every time. Because I was able to recall this feeling. This happened in a millisecond, by the way. I was able to recall these feelings so many times that happened in my life, and then patch together the outcome post that feeling. And it's like the lights came on, and I just said to myself, holy shit. This is the feeling I get when I'm about to do something that I haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to grow. I'm going to come out on the other side. Okay. I always have. And if I don't, I don't. Like what's going to happen? Well, from that day forward, I almost seek this feeling. It sounds bizarre, but it's like a dopamine rush for me now. Like when I'm in a spot and I get this feeling, like good stuff's coming, right? All right, take a breath, get through it, think about it a little bit. But now I embrace it. I embrace it. And I've passed that along to a number of people, including my son, by the way, who's gone through a number of career transitions as a young guy. And I just said to him, I said, you're reaching for the stars here. How do you feel? He goes, nervous. I said, yeah, because you're about to learn something huge. It's going to be so great. It took him a little bit. And I don't think he's at a spot where I am, but, I've been through a lot more life than he is. And I'm father of 3 kids, married 30 some odd years. So, I don't know, just wanted to share that with you because when I was listening to you, I said, boy, I know where she is. And that's exactly how I have felt. Exactly how I felt. Hey, thank you for letting me share that, by the way. I've never shared that in 30 some odd episodes. I would like to transition to your social media presence, if you don't mind. We haven't really touched it. I think you're a master marketer, by the way. I don't think I've told you that. I think the way you write and sort of think the way you make people feel with the things you put out there and how you communicate. Now you're like this brand ambassador for resorts, from what I can see, right? Is that a good thing to call it?
A part of my business is luxury concierge services. So
Okay.
high-end profile clients sometimes need help finding resorts to go to. So I go in to these resorts and do write-ups on them, which I love doing because it makes me showcase it.
You look like you're having a blast when you're doing them, by the way. I just want to let you know that.
I'm in paradise. I can't complain. So most of these
Exactly.
places are really lovely. But I started that when I first started my business. Part of my business was heavily involved with yachts and jets, which I'm an ambassador for Onyx Air. But you got to plug them in somewhere. But
that's okay.
I do.
Plug all you like.
Check out these different hotels. I never you'll never see me write anything ill or negative about a business. I always respect their time they take to walk with me through a property, showcase their property, show what they can provide. Even if I don't book them for a project I'm looking for, I'm always showing what other people can use them for, just because they take the time out of their day to let me see it.
Sure.
And I have a huge variety of different resorts I've worked with on different levels, 4-star, 5-star. Don't do a lot of 3s, but on most of I love the 5-star plus or the ultra luxury opportunities that I've had. But yeah, I love writing it up. Those are actually what kind of catapult me into where I'm at on my platforms because everyone loves to live vicariously somebody else. So those pictures tend to normally when I travel get a ton of impressions and a lot of likes and lots of colors, a lot of food, a lot of music.
Yeah.
I can do to showcase that property. It just really brings people in.
What are your top resorts in Cabo? Because before we started, you told me that's your happy place. You love Cabo.
So I love be real quick, my camera might die and I might switch to my phone for warning. I think my laptop's blinking at me. I don't have my cord. So if I disconnect, it's not unplugging.
Yeah, no worries.
But no, actually I love the brand new Four Seas in Los Cabos. Our San Lucas actually, it's basically, I got to see them at their quiet opening. I think they're going to have their full opening in February, but it's a beautiful venue. The new Four Seasons there. I love Las Montanas. It literally feels like you've walked out into paradise, like a magazine. You can't, anywhere you look to take a picture, you can't go wrong. It's absolutely stunning. And of course, the hospitality there is phenomenal. I've never had any issues with Las Montanas. I've held multiple big dinners there. I've done room blocks with there. Those are probably going to be right now. And of course, the Ritz-Carlton was really, I love the Ritz over there. Chichilo Chinilo Bay was phenomenal. They have a phenomenal staff over there. I love more of the exclusive experience properties versus the commercialized ones. Because I get more personal with their staff. It feels more intimate, mostly if you're traveling with a significant other or your family. Or if you do I've done trips. I love the St. Regis and Puerto Rico. That was absolutely one of the most beautiful properties, one of the most amazing spas I've ever experienced was done at the St. Regis in Puerto Rico. So
nice. I promised you a Cabo story when we started.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to make good on my promise to you right now. So we went on a bit of a couples trip. I think 4 couples. I forget. It was 2021. It was like we had to get out of here. It was year after COVID, and people were still cautious, but we were going. We were going. And we stayed at the Montage. Are you familiar with the
Oh yeah,
Montage?
yeah, it's nice.
It's a beautiful place, and it has that cove, right? What's just cool is you can find a unique on that side of the water there, of that side of the peninsula, to be able to actually go in the water is kind of unique. We're having a great time. And my wife says, hey, let's go down to the water and, maybe get some paddle boards or something and just bust around in the cove. And my wife's super athletic, so she's standing on the paddle board and we're buzzing around. And I'm like, hey, you might want to take off those sunglasses because, you're going to fall off. These are, no, I'm going to be fine. Whatever. She's got jewelry on and all of this stuff. So I had enough. I was buzzing around a kayak. She was still staying in the water with one of her friends. And I go back up to one of the cabanas and we're hanging in. She comes back, Michele, doubled over like someone stabbed her in the gut. And she's sobbing. My first thought is somebody died because it looked that bad. And she's hyperventilating and she's freaking out. I'm like, what happened? And what I finally make out is she lost her bracelet. So this was a Chanel love bracelet that we had modified to have a hinge and a clasp so she could take it on and off. Okay. And had diamonds in it. It was nice. It was an anniversary gift. And she said, well, listen, those things are expensive, but when you go from somebody dying to I lost my love bracelet, you're relieved. It's like, if you went from I lost 3 cents to I lost the love bracelet, you're upset. When you go from somebody dying to I lost the love bracelet. And so I looked at her and I said, listen, there's nothing we can do about it. It's gone. Thank God everybody's okay. But you know what? Let's go take a walk on the beach and let's see, maybe it fell off when you came in. No, I fell off the thing. I know exactly what happened. As we're walking down, one of the lifeguards says, Miss, I found your sunglasses. Well, she didn't tell me she lost her sunglasses as well. So we're looking around and one of the people who work services there says, why is she so upset? She got her sunglasses back. I said, no, she lost the bracelet. So she goes over and talks to one of the guys. She goes, I got this guy. He's the equivalent of the Mexican Marine. He can swim and find anything. We're in this cove. It's deep, right? There's no way. So he comes over, speaks no English. I know a little bit of Spanish. I tell him over there. He puts a weighted belt on, goggles, and he has a rope with a like a little buoy on it, little float. There's a flotation device. So we know where he is. He goes down. He's down a while. He comes up. He goes down again. Then he swims out and he goes down. And like the phoenix rising from the ashes, you see a fist come out of the water first, and you see a shiny gold bracelet on the other end of it. And we were absolutely, like, my wife it was like somebody was brought back from the dead. Who loses a bracelet in the ocean and gets it back? No one. And so it was just a funny time. It's a cool story. We had since gone back to that cove because we went and celebrated a friend's wedding, and we took a little catamaran into that cove from another area of Cabo so we could all swim and snorkel and whatnot, and then took off. And when I was finally in the water with a snorkel on, I was like, this is so easy. It's so clear. I could see all the way to the bottom. But that's one of our funny, famous Cabo stories that, one of the guys that worked at the resort, and I gave him an obscenely big tip, which was great because I probably gave him a month's pay. But he was crying. He was happy. My wife was crying. I had a big savings. It was good. And it turned I would have still loved the trip. My wife would have hated it, but now we all love the trip. And the Montage, by the way, fantastic property.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen it, but I haven't stayed the night there yet.
It's a good place. Hey, this has been a fun hour and 15 minutes. And I can't thank you enough because you shared some very personal stuff, which is very nice and very honest and sincere. I know there are a lot of lessons in here and a lot of nuggets along the way. And that's the whole point of 10,000 miles. Like, everybody thinks people are smiling and happy and everything for them was so easy. But what I find out in talking to people on their own paths to success, what's behind all that visible smile and happiness and grit and determination? Well, a lot of battle scars, a lot of wounds, a lot of adversity, a lot of things to overcome. And you're an inspiring individual. You really are. You have a great story. I'm a big fan, and hopefully at some point down the future we'll do this again. I'll have you
So,
back, and you can expand more, and we can pick a topic, whether it be specifically the travel, or we dive deep into what you do in the legal space and the event coordination, or maybe even tell me about your new adventure. Because if you're seeing the 3-2s right now, I could only imagine that the next quarters of next year are going to be quite exciting for you.
yeah, we're releasing something big. So something I'm
Absolutely. Well, it's good. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to have you on 10,000 Miles, and thank you again.
well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.